Chapter 15. The Demon of Death. Deagan fell through absolute silence. Not the silence of the void he had known before, but a silence so deep it felt like a weight pressing on his chest, choking the air out of him. Even his chains no longer rattled. They hung still, lifeless, as if time itself had stopped their movement. The fall was endless and instantaneous at once. Then he was standing. The realm around him was unlike anything he had seen in hell. There was no sky, no ground, only a vast plain of gray ash stretching infinitely in every direction. The air was heavy and stagnant, tasting of dust and decay. There was no wind, no movement. The horizon rippled like heat, but when he looked closer, he realized it wasn't heat, it was souls. Millions of them, pale and faceless, wandering aimlessly through the ash. They moved slowly, as if underwater, their forms flickering in and out of existence. Some crawled, some dragged themselves, some simply stood and stared blankly into nothing. Deagan stepped forward, the ash crunching under his boots like brittle bone. The moment he moved, the souls stopped and turned to face him. Their heads snapped in unison, their eyeless faces stretching into wide, unnatural smiles. A voice, deep, slow, final, rolled through the realm like thunder. "The last one has arrived." The souls screamed, not in terror, but in celebration, their cries like a choir of the dead. They clawed at themselves, ripping their own skin as they screamed his name. "Deagan, Deagan, Deagan." The ash shifted, pulling itself into shapes, figures of bone, skeletal bodies crawling out of the ground, their jaws unhinged. They swarmed toward him, but they didn't attack. They simply knelt, heads bowed to the ground. The air trembled. The ground cracked. From the center of the plain rose a throne made of skulls, bound together by chains of rusted iron. Upon it sat the demon of death. It was vast, its form shifting between a skeleton cloaked in shadow and a figure wrapped in rotting flesh. Its eyes burned with pale blue fire that froze the air. Around its neck hung a chain of severed clocks, each one stopped at a different time. Its presence drained the world of color, sound, even thought. When it spoke, reality itself shook. "You have walked through fire, through shadow, through terror. You have killed what cannot be killed. But here in my realm all things end." Deagan's voice was calm, but his chains glowed faintly, twitching like they could sense their final battle. "I've heard that before. They all said I couldn't win. They were all wrong." The demon of death slowly rose from its throne, towering above him, its voice like the grave opening. "They were my servants, I am not." The ground erupted, skeletal hands bursting from the ash, clawing at Deagan's legs. He tore free, the chains snapping out and ripping the skeletons apart. But for every one he destroyed, 10 more rose. Death's voice boomed. "You cannot kill what is already dead. You cannot fight me as you fought the others. I do not burn, I do not bleed, I only end." The souls screamed louder, their bodies tearing apart, feeding their essence into the demon. Its body swelled, its bones stretching, its shadow spreading like an endless storm. Deagan stood his ground, eyes cold. "Then I'll end you." The chains lit white, glowing brighter than ever. The ash rose like a wave as the first phase began, Deagan against the endless dead. The skyless world trembled as the first wave of the dead surged forward. They weren't like the demons of fear or the shadows of despair. These things didn't scream. They didn't breathe, didn't bleed. They moved in perfect silence, their bones clattering like dry leaves, their eyeless sockets fixed on Deagan with hunger that wasn't hunger. Deagan's chains lashed out like living vipers, glowing white as they tore through the skeletal horde. Each strike shattered dozens of them into ash. But unlike other demons, these reformed instantly, crawling back together, rising again. He ripped one apart with his bare hands, crushing its skull, only for the pieces to crawl back across his arms and reattach. The chains glowed brighter, burning through the undead, but every kill drained him. The white light dimmed with each use. They don't die, they don't stop. The demon of death's voice rolled like distant thunder, calm yet final. They are not meant to be defeated. They are the truth of all things. Everything rises to fall again. The horde swarmed him, their clawed hands cutting deep into his arms and shoulders. Dozens piled onto him, their weight crushing his chest. Deagan roared, the chains bursting outward in a shockwave of white light, vaporizing everything around him. The ground cracked, ash spiraling upward like a storm. But as soon as the light faded, they rose again. The sky tore open, and rivers of black ash poured downward, forming towering skeletal beasts, massive, four-legged monsters made from the bones of thousands. Their hollow eyes burned faintly blue, like their master. One lunged, its jaw snapping. Deagan rolled aside, his chains whipping around its neck. With a brutal pull, he yanked the monster to the ground, snapping its spine. But as soon as it hit, it reformed, larger than before. The demon of death stepped forward, its towering frame bending slightly, as if mocking him. You see, Deagan, you can kill fear, you can kill hope, but death cannot be killed. Death is patient, death waits. The ash around him rose, swirling, forming a storm of skeletal wings that sliced through the ground. The storm encircled him, closing tighter, cutting into his skin with every gust. The chains dimmed further. His arms trembled. The cracks across his body, earned from despair and fear, spread wider, glowing faintly white. The demon's voice softened, almost like a whisper inside his skull. You are burning out. Every chain you swing consumes what little remains of you. Why fight? You will not wake, you will not escape. Lay down and I will make it painless. For the first time in a long time, Deagan felt his legs buckle. The weight of the dead pressed down on him, not just physically but spiritually. Every soul he had killed screamed from inside him, a storm of voices clawing at his mind. His vision blurred, the battlefield tilting. No, not like this, not here. The skeletal horde surged again, crashing over him like a tidal wave. He vanished beneath their claws. The chains fell silent, their light almost gone. The demon of death raised one hand, and the world itself seemed to kneel. And the swarm buried him completely. Skeletal hands clawed at his flesh, their fingers digging deep, pulling him apart piece by piece. They didn't just tear at his body, they clawed at his very existence, peeling away his memories, his identity, his soul. Every touch felt like falling further into a grave without bottom. This is death. This is what it means to be nothing. The world went black, the sound of bones faded. Even the pain dissolved into emptiness. When Deagan opened his eyes, he was no longer on the battlefield. He stood in a tomb of infinite size, walls made of gravestones stacked endlessly, each one engraved with his name. Thousands, millions. The air was cold, not the chill of wind, but the absence of warmth. Each breath he took crystallized in the air, though there was no air to breathe. The chains were gone. His body was naked, pale, cracking apart like old stone. When he moved, pieces of him crumbled away. From the darkness stepped the demon of death, now larger than ever, its frame scraping the ceiling of the tomb. Its eyes burned like two dying stars. Its voice was quiet, but its quiet was heavier than thunder. This is where you end, Deagan, the grave where all things end. No fire, no fight, just stillness. Deagan's voice cracked, weak. Not yet. Death moved closer, its towering form casting a shadow so deep it swallowed everything. Why do you cling to nothing? You have lost rage, love, hope, and fear. You are hollow. Even hell no longer claims you. The gravestones pulsed, light flickering in their cracks. Deagan's legs trembled, his body crumbling with every step he took forward. The tomb seemed to drag at him, pulling him down with invisible chains. It's over, you've burned yourself out. The demon of death extended a massive hand, placing it over him like the sky itself was falling. Rest, boy, you have walked far enough. The hand descended, pressing him into the stone floor. His bones cracked, his vision dimmed. Deep inside the crumbling ruin of his body, something stirred. Not warmth, not hope, not even defiance. Something colder, something older. The pure refusal to stop moving. It was the same spark that had pulled him out of despair, out of fear, but now it had grown into something darker, not human, not alive, a force that simply refused to end. The cracks across his body glowed blinding white. His fingers, though broken, clenched into fists. His lips moved and a single word escaped, cutting through the silence. No. The floor shattered. The gravestones exploded outward in a storm of white light. Death reeled back, its shadow torn apart by the eruption. Deagan rose, not as a man, not even as the cold figure he had been. His body was now made of cracks filled with pure white fire, his eyes glowing like suns. The chains reappeared, wrapped around him, alive, burning with the same light. The tomb collapsed, its walls imploding. The demon of death staggered, for the first time showing something close to hesitation. Its voice trembled low. "What have you become?" Deagan's voice was no longer human. It was quiet, but it made the world shake. The end of endings. The chains shot out, piercing the demon's chest, anchoring into its bones. The white fire spread from the chains into death itself, burning through its form. The creature roared, the sound splitting the air, the tomb, the very concept of silence. The chains burned into death's chest, their white fire spreading like veins of light through its towering frame. The demon staggered, its voice no longer calm but roaring, shaking the broken tomb to dust. "You dare burn what cannot die." Its body twisted violently, shadow and bone tearing apart, reforming into something colossal, a shape so vast it blotted out everything. Its skeletal wings spread across the sky, stretching beyond the horizon, every bone glowing faint blue with necrotic power. The world of ash collapsed inward, forming a vortex where gravity tore itself apart. Souls were ripped from the ground, sucked screaming into the storm that swirled around death. The throne of skulls rose again, not as a seat but as a weapon, fusing into a massive scythe made from the bones of the dead. The demon's voice was no longer words, but a wave of annihilation. Everything ends here. The sky shattered, raining shards of darkness. Time itself fractured, the world glitching. One moment Deagan stood in the tomb, the next in the void, then back in the ash plain. The laws of reality cracked like glass. Deagan stood his ground. His cracked body burned brighter, the chains alive with a furious, unnatural glow. His voice, quiet but absolute, cut through the chaos. "I told you I don't stop." Death swung the scythe. The blade tore through the air, slicing the ground open, splitting the sky. The shockwave hit Deagan, throwing him across the battlefield. His body shattered against the stone, white fire spilling from his cracks. He pushed himself up, pieces of himself falling away, yet he stood. The chains surged outward, embedding into the scythe, locking it mid-swing. Death pulled, the ground breaking beneath its feet, but Deagan held the other end. The chains glowed brighter, burning into the weapon, spreading their white fire through it. Death screamed, its voice tearing apart dimensions. "You are DFYNG, the final law." Deagan stepped forward slowly, pulling the scythe toward him inch by inch. "Then I'll break your law." The scythe cracked, glowing white as the chains tightened. With one final pull, Deagan shattered it, the weapon exploding into shards of bone and shadow. The demon staggered, roaring in pain. Its massive wings cracked, splintering, its body breaking apart. But instead of falling, it unleashed its final form, a storm of shadows and bone fragments, swirling into a tornado of death that consumed everything in its path. The vortex swallowed Deagan whole. Inside was nothing, no ground, no sky, only spinning blades of bone, screaming souls, and crushing pressure that ripped flesh from bone. His cracks widened, his body breaking apart under the sheer force. This is it. If I stop now, I die. If I keep going, maybe I still die. Inside the storm, the chains wrapped around him tighter, glowing like dying stars. He pulled them inward, concentrating every ounce of power, every shred of what he had left, into one final strike. The light inside him burned so bright it felt like his very essence was on fire. One last time. With a roar that shook creation, Deagan unleashed the chains outward, piercing through the vortex. They shot through death's swirling form, anchoring into its core. The white fire erupted, consuming the storm, tearing through the demon piece by piece. Death screamed, not a roar of rage but of fear. "You cannot." The chains pulled tight. Deagan whispered, his voice the only sound in the collapsing realm. "Watch me." He pulled. The demon's core imploded. The storm collapsed inward, crushing itself to a single point of white light. The explosion that followed was silent but absolute, erasing everything. The ash plane, the tomb, the sky, the souls, all vanished. Only Deagan remained, standing alone in a void of white. His body was falling apart, chunks breaking away and turning to ash, but he still stood. The cloaked figure appeared, its form flickering, unstable. Even its voice was different, quieter, almost reverent. "You broke death." Deagan turned to it slowly, his eyes burning with cold fire. "I told you, nothing stops me." The figure's cloak rippled, shadows spilling out, trembling like a storm barely contained. "You are no longer a soul. You are no longer a man. You are a force that hell itself cannot hold." Deagan's body cracked further, more pieces falling away, but his voice was steady. "Then open the way. I'm not done yet." The figure's white lights dimmed, almost like it bowed. "Very well, but what waits beyond this is not hell. It is not life. It is not death. It is something older." The void split open into a spiral of black and white fire, sucking everything into its center. Deagan stepped toward it without hesitation. The figure's last words followed him, trembling with something close to awe. "You are the storm, and storms do not end.